Mei-Li. I watched the girl put her sunglasses back on and fumble with her car keys. Watched her push a few strands of hair out of her face with the back of her hand. And man, I gotta state it for the record, Mei-Li was probably the hottest hipster Asian chick you could ever meet. She was around 19 or 20 with short, choppy green and black hair and big, round eyes. She had a silver eyebrow ring and wore a skull and bones necklace and a wife beater and black dickies with a chain going from her wallet to her belt. There were two Chinese characters tattooed on the side of her left wrist and one on her shoulder. With most girls who dress like that, I figured they were witches who might cast a mad evil spell on your ass. But with Mei-Li, it was different. I bet you could shave old girl's head completely bald and dress her ass in garbage bags and she'd still be fine as hell. She slipped into the driver's seat, pulled close her door. As Rondell climbed into the back seat, I turned to Mong, who'd been watching me stare down his cousin the whole time. "What?" I said. He didn't say anything back, though, just looked at me for a couple more seconds like his old psycho self, and then ducked into the other front seat. I waved Jude off and looked around the parking lot at all the people going in and out of cars and stores and walking with shopping bags full of brand new stuff. I saw this group of kids around our age carrying skateboards. They were laughing and pointing at one kid sipping on a big McDonald's Coke. You'd probably think it made me feel bad about myself because they weren't running from the cops. They were just out in the open, laughing and having a good time. And maybe it did make me feel a little bad, but mostly I just felt excited. Like me, Mong, and Rondell were getting away with some bank robbery or something, and nobody knew. Like we were outlaws from back in the Wild West days, riding out of town on our horses toward Mexico with all the money. It's how we were different from other people, original. I slid into the seat behind Mong's cousin and closed the door. Mei-Li turned the key in the ignition and some punk music started blaring out of the speakers, but she only lowered the volume a little as she put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space. "All right, boys," she shouted over the screeching guitar solo. "Here we go." We got out of the parking lot okay, and Mei-Li used her blinker and moved us into the main road all safe and sound, but when we got up to where you could merge onto the freeway, she didn't take the on-ramp going south like she was supposed to toward Mexico. She got on the one going north. Me and Mong both whipped our heads around, watched the southbound on-ramp fade into the distance. "May," Mong shouted, turning to her. "Oh, by the way," she said, lighting a cigarette, not looking back at Mong, "I'm taking you guys to Mexico, just not yet. That's the part where you're supposed to trust me. First we're going to Gurnerville, up past San Francisco, so Mong can see his gong gong." She rubbed Mong's shoulder, even though he seemed crazy pissed, and glanced at me and Rondell in the rear view. I was so shocked it felt like my entire body went numb. "This is shit, May," Mong shouted, his eyes looking like he could kill somebody, and then he turned and stared straight ahead. Mei-Li pulled her hand off Mong's shoulder and blew her smoke out the window. She looked at the side of his face and said, "He knows how sick you are, babe. He's worried. It's the least we can do if you really plan on running off to a whole other country." Mong didn't say anything else, just kept staring ahead, and after a few seconds a little smile actually came onto his face, the one he does where his mouth forms a regular smile, but his eyes look totally empty, like he's thinking about something psycho. He picked up the seatbelt Mei-Li had made him put on and didn't even turn to look at his cousin. I was pissed too. I thought we were going straight to Mexico, where my brand new life was about to start, like a second chance, a do-over. But at the same time, I wasn't as stressed as Mong. I figured we'd still get there eventually, long as we kept ducking the cops. How much did the cops even care about group home kids anyway? They probably had bigger things to worry about, like murders and rapes and terrorists sneaking onto airplanes. But more than anything, I was just confused about this Gong Gong person and what Mong's cousin meant about Mong being sick. "Here's the deal," Mei-Li said, her eyes back on the road now. "I know you guys aren't all on weekend pass. 3 at one time, all of you hiding behind a dumpster like fugitives? I'm not that naive. I have a boyfriend who's cheated on me 3 times. Sadly, I've been made aware that the world's made up of mostly BS." Mei-Li shook her head. She ejected the CD we'd been listening to and slipped in a different one. "Anyway, I figure since I'm doing you guys a big solid by picking you up, aiding and abetting and all that, it's not too much to ask for a little something in return. Mong here sees his gong gong, spends a few quality hours with him, maybe sits down for a nice dinner, and then we turn around and head for Mexico. Simple as that." The car was quiet for a few minutes as Mei-Li merged over a couple lanes and onto a different freeway. I looked at Mong sitting there, smiling, and tried to think what Mei-Li meant about him being sick. He was little, yeah, and he had those nasty scars on his cheeks, but dude seemed strong and scrappy as hell. I should know since I'm the one who fought him my first day. I turned to Rondell. The guy was out cold again, baby afro pressed all up against the window, mouth wide open. I couldn't blame him this time, though. We were all tired after sitting against the damn dumpster for an entire night. Then I looked out the window at all the cars driving next to us. I thought how weird it was that none of the drivers, not even the guy in the suit or the old man with giant sunglasses or the guy with the backwards hat or the fat woman eating a bag of chips, knew us three were on the run. That once we went to Mexico, we could never come back to this freeway again for the rest of our lives. We could only drive on Mexican freeways. I pulled out my journal and pen and started writing everything I was thinking. Mei-Li saw me scribbling away in her rear view and said, "Wait, Miguel, don't tell me you're a writer." I looked up at her and shrugged, said, "I guess so." "I love writing," she said back. "I took a class last semester with this crazy old hippie, Professor Weltzer. He was funny, made everybody call him Rick. Anyway, what do you write? Poems, short stories, screenplays?" I shrugged again. "Nah, I'm supposed to do this journal thing for some counselor, but I just put whatever comes in my head." "That's so interesting," she said, and then this excited look came over her face and she said, "Hey, maybe if I tell you stuff, maybe one day you'll write a story about me." "I probably could," I said, though I didn't really get how she meant. "I would love that," she said. "Nobody's ever written a story about me before." Her face went into a big smile as she checked her side mirror and changed lanes to get around this little Indian dude in an old beat-up truck. I looked up at Mong, who was still staring straight ahead with his crazy blank look. It was like he was so pissed off he couldn't even hear what we were saying. I wondered why I wasn't as mad as him. Us not going straight to Mexico was happening for me, too. I almost felt like a sellout for not being madder. Mei-Li turned down her music some, said, "I guess the first thing you're wondering is why I'm still with my boyfriend, right?" She pulled in a drag and blew her smoke out at the roof. After he cheated on me, I mean. I looked at her in the mirror. "Wait, aren't you going to write it?" "Oh, right," I said. I looked down at my journal and wrote how she had a boyfriend that messed around on her. I didn't know why I was supposed to write everything, but I could tell she liked thinking I was a writer, so I decided to be one. "Look," she said, "what I've come to realize over the past year is that life's not as black and white as some people would like to believe it is. That's something you should maybe put about me. For example, lots of girls say if a guy ever cheated on them, they'd end the relationship right there on the spot. But it's different when it actually happens to you. Besides, I did break up with Jay the first time, but he kept calling me and leaving these long messages about how sorry he was and how much he missed me. He sent flowers and cards and boxes of candy. After a few weeks, I picked up one of his calls, let him convince me it was a good idea to meet for coffee. We went to a Starbucks down the street and we talked and cried and shared a piece of carrot cake and then talked and cried some more. The next night, we met at a theater and saw a movie. It was an awful romantic comedy, but we couldn't stop laughing. 2 nights after that, we went to dinner for my birthday. Then I'd realized we just sort of gotten back together without ever saying we were getting back together. Know what I mean? I nodded, but she didn't look back at me. I didn't really know what she meant, but I decided I could figure out that part later. For now, I just had to write everything down. By the time it happened the second and third time, I was totally jaded about relationships in general. Besides, I'm transferring to UCSD at the end of the summer. It's not like I ever saw Jay and I getting married and having babies and doing the whole white picket fence thing. We're just passing time together. And sometimes it's just easier when you have another person, when you're not alone. She pulled in another drag and looked at Rondell in the rearview mirror, then looked at me. "God, that sounds so sad, doesn't it, Miguel?" "I guess so," I said, though I was too busy writing to really think about it. Maybe that's what growing up is. I mean, first they take away Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, then they shatter the idealized version you have of your parents, and finally they come looking for you. "Hey, little Asian girl, you know this life you were leading? The one you always thought was so special? Well, actually it's not that special at all. Actually, you're just a lonely, flawed person like everybody else. You'll have some good times and you'll have some bad times, but mostly you'll just have a lot of boring times. Mostly your days will just be painfully uneventful. Hey, maybe if you boil it down, Miguel, that's what life is, uneventful." She paused for a couple seconds, thinking about what she just said, and then she told me, "You could maybe have one of your characters say that if you want. You have my permission." "That's cool," I told her back, still writing. After I wrote the word permission, I shook out my cramping hand. Mei-Li caught my eyes in the rear view and said, What about you, Miguel? I want to know, how do you see the world? I looked back down at my journal, at Mei-Li's words I'd just written down, and I shifted my seat. I wanted so bad to come up with something just as deep, something that would impress Mei-Li and show her how smart I could be. But nothing was coming into my head. I don't even know, I finally said, shifting in my seat again. But maybe when something really bad happens in your life, maybe then you wish you could make it go back to being boring. I stared at the back of her headrest and pictured my mom's looking at me the last time, and the guards at juvie waiting, and my big bro Diego holding open the door of the fridge, pulling out the milk. I cleared my throat, said, maybe boring isn't so bad compared to the other stuff that could happen. Maylie nodded as she pulled out her cigarette. I think that's true, Miguel, she said. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. The car went quiet for a while as she sat there thinking. Rondell almost choked on his own breath and opened his eyes for a sec, but all he did was shift his head around and fall right back to sleep. Mom was still staring ahead like a zombie. Maylee's face looked sort of sad in the rear view, like she was remembering something from her past too. I wondered why she just told me so much about herself. I didn't mind or anything. I just never had somebody do that before, especially a girl. Then she sighed and said, sometimes I wonder if growing up isn't the saddest thing that can happen to a person.